Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican of Alaska, member of the Armed Services and Veterans Affairs Committees, and he is also the Republican representative for the United States at the United Nations. A big week for you, and so glad to have you on set with me.
Great to be on the show, Harris. Thanks.
Absolutely. We don't know what Kamala Harris's foreign policy is going to be. We just saw the last speech by the sitting president, and it was not strong considering the breaking news right now. I mean, there is a war now across that line and between Lebanon and Israel. If this is what we get under President Biden, what in the world would we get under Vice President Kamala Harris if she wins the White House?
Well, it's such an important question, and you just saw the speech, right? Biden mentions climate change 6 times in Iran twice. I mean, if that's not indicative of this administration's priorities, Biden, Harris, I don't know. But what we've seen is chaos throughout the world. His last foreign policy speech, I think Americans and people around the world need to ask this question: is America and our allies safer today than it was 4 years ago? The answer is absolutely not. And one of the biggest areas in which that has been true and a failure of this administration is the appeasement of Iran. That Iran is the agent of chaos everywhere. Your reporting right now is just showing that. They have appeased Iran in every sphere. And as you mentioned, I think with Kamala Harris, it would be way worse. And you got to compare the record of the Trump administration with regard to Iran, where we reestablished deterrence, put them in a box, crushed them economically, killed their terrorist leaders, and launched a peace initiative with the Abraham Accords. Such a contrast in terms of records.
Well, and what's really dangerous is that we don't know what she would do.
That's right.
Because we don't know who's making these decisions now. I mean, Biden has been about as lame duck as you could be. They took him off the top of the ticket, and now he moves on. He even talked about that at the UN, saying it was his decision. To bring it up there seemed out of context. He had to have known. And I'm not on the Armed Services Committee for the Senate, but I would think that there was even a heads up for you. Maybe it wasn't confirmed, but you knew they took somebody out.
Yeah. And look, in the fact that the president's up there saying, hey, I left voluntarily, that's a little bit rich, because the whole world knows what happened. But again, this issue of where this administration has been relative to the Trump administration, this is a really interesting election, because you have 2 records. One of the Trump administration when they were in power in terms of foreign policy and national security, and one of Biden, Harris. And these records couldn't be more different. And for the American people, much more security for our country and our allies under President Trump.
This seemed to have a rapid ramp up in the Middle East. And in fact, I'll get more to this in a second about who we're sending and how many. But a new Wall Street Journal opinion piece says Biden's diplomatic magical thinking, quote, no administration in American history has been as committed to Middle East diplomacy as this one. Yet, has any other administration's diplomats ever had less success? Your reaction?
Well, one thing that you have to, when you look at history, diplomacy has to be backed by strength. And that was a great Wall Street Journal piece, because they mention all the diplomacy, but they also mention this fact about the Biden-Harris administration. They put forward budget cuts to our Department of Defense every single year. So the Republicans were all about peace through strength. That was in our platform in Milwaukee this past summer. The Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration right now, Harris, their budget shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps. You can't have effective diplomacy as you are gutting the readiness of your military.
All right, I want to get to 2 things. First of all, Major General Ryder told us yesterday, and then it filled in the blanks a little bit, saying, well, it's a small number that they're sending to the Middle East to shore up the 40,000 who were there. Well, that's anything less than 40,000. What is happening, and you're on Armed Services, what is happening that you can tell us that's next for the United States in that region? And keeping in mind, we have to back Israel.
We 100% have to back Israel. And one of the things that's been so frustrating with this administration is that some of the most effective tools that we have in terms of backing Israel in reestablishing deterrence with regard to Iran aren't necessarily military tools. Let me give you the best example. The Trump administration undertook maximum sanctions against the Iranian oil and gas industry. By the end of the Trump administration, Iran's economy was in free fall. They were exporting only about 200,000 barrels a day. They had about $4 billion in foreign reserves, which was nothing. The Biden-Harris administration comes in day one, they stop enforcing these sanctions. What does that do? Iran is exporting almost 3 million barrels a day, has close to $100 billion in foreign reserves. And what are they doing with that? They're funding and equipping and training Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas. So a lot of this appeasement has been just reversing what the Trump administration did so well. And you're seeing the chaos all over the Middle East.
All right.
The president, Biden and Harris, should at least reimpose these sanctions.
I have yet to hear her talk about it.
No, they won't.
I mean, they can do what they do, but it's time to talk to the American people. You broke some news with me in the hallway as we were coming to set. I want to just take a moment. Russia.
Yeah.
We cannot take our eyes off Russia. You said a fourth incursion. What's happening
Actually,
in Alaska?
5. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 5 Russian Bear bomber incursions into our AIDAs, our airspace. Our great men and women in the military have gone up and intercepted these aircraft. By the way, Harris, just about a month and a half ago, we had a joint Russian-Chinese Bear bomber incursion into the Alaska airspace. Strategic bombers with fighters. We had to go turn them around. But again, this is showing the weakness of the Biden-Harris administration. This level of aggressiveness from the 2 biggest adversaries in my part of the world, Alaska, the Arctic, the North Pacific, is unprecedented. They've never done these kind of joint patrols. They're doing it with regard to the Navy, too, in Alaska waters. So we have a lot going on in terms of aggressiveness of our adversaries. And the best way to address that is to regrow our military. And this administration won't do that.
Senator Dan Sullivan of the great state of Alaska, and representing all of us as the United States at the UN today, you brought a lot to bear today, and I'm appreciative of you being here.
Thank you. Great to be back on the show. We got to get you to Alaska, right?
Oh, you know I want to come. I hike. Let's go. Thank you.